Hey guys, it's Selwen here. Today let's talk about the Assassination Rogue. Assassination is a dot damage over time spec of the rogues, a mix between poisons and bleed attacks. Because of its dot nature, can prove to have strong single target damage, but in AoE scenarios can prove a little hectic trying to keep all them dots up, and in short-lived mobs your damage won't be that impressive. Like all rogue specs, survivability, defensives, utility are just amazing. Be it magic, melee damage, all of that you can take with ease due to your cooldowns, but on top, cheating death, self-healing, reducing AoE damage with feint, anything that is thrown at you, you have a tool to counter. But before all of that, let's talk about your talents. So on the first tier we get Elaborate Planning. Technically the best choice for everything. With every finishing move you gain a 10% damage increase buff for 4 seconds, so when playing properly you'll be able to keep it up rather nicely. In AoE this functions even better since you're gonna do quite a lot more finishing moves. Now that said, if you feel like you don't have what it takes to keep Elaborate Planning up, going for Master Poisoner won't be a huge DPS loss. That is, if you go for the poison build, just a passive increasing poison damage and increasing utility by making the slow from crippling poison more powerful. As Assassination, you actually have two builds that you can go for that have very similar numbers, so you can choose whichever you prefer. One will be the bleed build and the other the poison build. One more focused on bleeds, another more focused on poisons. The talent row that makes up this distinction is this one over here, but here on the first tier you do have that choice as well to some extent. As for Blindside, works as well if you prefer a new ability, an execute rather, that you can also get a proc at a 25% chance when using mutilates. It essentially replaces the same mutilate during procs or below 30% of HP. It is slightly more interesting than the others, but personally I would go for the other two unless you really need some execute damage for some reason. I just prefer the way Mutilate works with your combo points, and Blindside is gonna change some of that up, but again, you can use it if you so wish. Tier 2 we have Subterfuge. Generally the best, works for everything as well. After coming out of stealth for the next 3 seconds, it acts as you still stealthed. Plus, Garrote has no cooldown during that same duration, so it basically allows you to multi-dot Garrote, a great for cleaving and dungeons. In single targets, the benefit will be the higher damage on Garrote when used from stealth, mix Vanish here, and you have a DPS cooldown that traditionally wouldn't be for a slight DPS increase. Master Assassin is quite interesting as well. It also is turning Vanish into a DPS cooldown, although this time is increasing your crit chance by 50%, while in stealth and 3 seconds after breaking it. So it allows for more burst for sure, especially in AoE. However, you will be losing the Garrote spread, so choose whichever you prefer. As for Stalker, it's just a passive damage increase while in stealth, also making Vanish a DPS cooldown, but not as great as the other two. Vigor will be increasing your energy by 50% and its regeneration by 10%. So in the end, is making your rotation more fluid by allowing you to use your abilities more often. So it's gonna work for everything and is my recommended. However, the others have uses as well. A deeper Stratagem is increasing your max combo points from 5 to 6 and increasing finishing moves damage by 5%, plus on the extra combo points that you get. In the end, this will be good for AoE because your AoE combo generation is quite random, more on that later, so having the extra points can make AoE easier and better, although losing Vigor can suck. Marked for Death follows a similar idea, great for AoE to get 5 combo points to immediately spread, say, Rupture. But to make it worth, the target needs to die within 1 minute, so it refreshes its CD. So again, great for dungeons, but between waiting for the refresh and losing Vigor makes it a little less worth, but functional if you can work with it in dungeons. When it works really amazingly. Next is optional and situational. Cheat Death is just amazing. Anytime you would die, you, well, won't, so this will allow to cheese mechanics, soak, and prevent, well, death in general, which is as great as it sounds. Elusiveness is then great in general by improving feint, that otherwise only reduces area of effect damage to reduce all damage by 30%, so yet even more survivability to an already really powerful kit, so remember to use it, okay? As for Leeching Poison, is a secondary poison to just heal through damage due to leech, the go-to choice when you don't need the other two. On to tier 5 is once again the optional situational tier. Iron Wire is pretty cool as it allows your Garrote to reduce the damage done by the target by 15%, so extra utility for your tank to take less damage. Combine this with Subterfuge and it will work even better on trash packs. A Prey of the Week is then also really quite interesting, as enemies are stunned by abilities like Chip Shot or Kidney Shot will increase their damage taken by 10%, so again more utility for all of your group to deal more damage in trade for a bit of your own. Can work great on trash or ads. As for Internal Bleeding is the least useful as it only adds a dot to Kidney Shot. Next is a tier that sets you to either the Bleed build or the Poison build. Toxic Blade is a short cooldown ability, increasing all poison damage for 30% for 9 seconds, allowing for stronger envenoms and poison bombs, if you're lucky, and just general poison damage, while Extinguish simply causes your bleeds to deal damage 100% faster, so double as fast, so for your Ruptures and Garrotes, turning dots into really high burst. And as for Venom Rush, muddles a bit of this water, so these two builds, causing you to gain 5 energy per Mutilate, and it's alright, but the others are far better and far more interesting. And on the last tier we get Poison Bomb. I'm sure you all familiar with it, this super RNG ability that procs off Envenom and Rupture on a 5% chance per combo point. When it does proc, it's really quite amazing damage, both for AoE and single target, which on top of Toxic Blade gets even better. It's also the easiest choice of the tier. Crimson Tempest works only for sustained AoE, is a finishing move, a sort of AoE Rupture dot, so can work great for ad fights or dungeons. That said, to be worth, the dot needs to tick for a reasonable amount of time, so outside of Fortified Weak and High Keys, where trash has meaningful HP, more often than not, it won't do much, so take that in mind. As for Hidden Blades, it has its niche, it technically works for everything, a passive buff to your Fan of Knives, increasing its damage by 20% every 2 seconds for 20 stacks, so every 40 seconds or so, you get this big Fan of Knives to use, which is good, but in sustaining AoE or dungeons, you're never gonna stack it that high. Ironically, only on bosses it will, which again, the damage is actually fine, but I recommend Poison Bomb over it, even though damage-wise is pretty even. With all of that covered, let's go over rotation and priorities and all of that good stuff. In terms of poisons, you want to be running with Deadly Poison. Clearly, don't forget that you need to refresh it every 1 hour. Also take in mind you can have Crippling Poison at the same time for the slow, which is so useful in dungeons. And before going to openers and CDs, let's talk about the general idea of how to play Assassination, so your basic rotation. Now, a couple of things you need to keep in mind when playing Assassination is this very important passive. Seal Fate. When abilities that can generate combo points crits, it generates an extra. This will be a very important passive on how to properly manage your combo points, especially with Mutilate. As for your other passive, Venomous Wounds is simply giving you more energy whenever a bleed damages a poison target, so emphasizing the bleed plus poison playstyle of Assassination, but also grants energy when a target dies with Rupture on, helping a lot when dealing with trash mobs. So because of that, when starting fights, you always want to start in stealth because of Garrote and Subterfuge. Just a bleed that can also silence targets, so you can use it in some pretty cool ways against casters to pull them in. Besides the Subterfuge bonus and Vanish, which we're gonna talk about later, Garrote is just something you need to refresh anytime below 5 seconds. After, you're gonna move on to Mutilate to build combo points and to build your finishers, Rupture and Envenom. As for the poisons, they are applied naturally or with Mutilate as well. Now here is where combo management comes into play. Mutilate generates 2, 1 per attack. Mutilate is actually a double attack with both of your daggers, but because of Seal Fate, if one of them crits or both, you're gonna generate more combo points. So it can be quite random, ranging from 2 to 3 or even 4 if both crit. This is something that you want to have on your mind constantly, and because of it will change how you're gonna use said mutilates. Right now, after a garrote, we add 1 combo point, so it's fine to use a single mutilate. We might get to 3 or 4 or even the 5 points. With that said, you want to avoid casting mutilates at 4 or more combo points, so obviously you don't overcap them. The same follows for all of your other generators like garrote. It gives 1, so you want to avoid using it when at 5 points. However, there is a garrote trait that makes it generate 2 combo points, so if you have it, adapt to it. More on that later, but in general, that's the gist of your combo management. So that initial mutilate, if we get to 3 points, feel free to use a second mutilate to reach the 5. If you got 4 or 5, you can finally move to your finishers, which in this case will be Rupture. Like garrote is a pretty high priority ability, another dot to keep up. The idea with it is just to have it up, refreshing anytime you add 4+ points and below 7.2 seconds. This is when the pandemic effect will come in. To put it simply, the pandemic effect is a hidden mechanic on dots that adds certain timers, in this case 7.2 seconds. The refresh will just add the time on top of each other for this sweet spot uptime on that same dot. After, you have 2 dots nicely set up and on a good timer, so it's time to move on to your envenoms. To do those, you once again want to mutilate for combo points. Just like Rupture, you want to use it until 4 to 5+ combo points or 5 or 6 combo points if with deeper stratagem. Envenom is a finisher that not only deals damage but also grants a buff, increasing your poison application chance by 30%. The reason why that's good is because when deadly poison is initially applied as a dot, subsequent applications just deals more direct damage. Envenom is simply increasing the chance of that. Using it as much as possible within its priority list at 4+ points is gonna be your goal. But yeah, after this you'll just keep it up, refreshing them dots and using them finishers, of which you might have a chance at those poison bombs for some pretty sweet damage. A neat little tip regarding combo points is that when you add 4 points and ready to do a Rupture or envenoms, you can actually take advantage of garrote that only generates 1 with no risk of overcapping due to Sylphate, since crits with it do not generate an extra point. Now, what about when using Toxic Blade? The idea with it is actually quite simple, to increase poison damage. It also grants combo points 1, and like Mutilate, if it crits, grants 2, so try to avoid using it at 4 combo points, but it's fine if you really need to. When to use it? Well, simply on cooldown, and before you're gonna do an envenom, because since it increases poison damage, you want to always use it before envenoms for optimal damage, since it will apply a lot of poisons, and on itself envenom also benefits from its damage increase. As for Extinguish, is slightly more tricky, and to explain it better will be in your opener, so let's just jump to it. Here in your opener we will have a couple of new abilities, Vendetta and the use of Vanish. So first let's go over with Toxic Blade, so poison build, and with Subterfuge. Like before, you want to make sure that you start with Stealth to go for that more powerful garrote. Then you want to build for your second dot, Rupture, so mutilates until 4+ points. Only after all that setup is when you pop your Vendetta. Pointless to use it before since you're just applying your dots. Vendetta will increase your overall damage by 30% to that same target and give 60 energy over 3 seconds. Only thing to worry about it before popping is to make sure the target lives long enough for the duration of the debuff and you're not too close to the cap of energy, so again you don't overcap. Besides that, there's also a new trait in 8.1 that will improve Vendetta further, granting more energy plus deal poison damage over its duration, so heavily synergizing with Toxic Blade. After, you want to build towards an envenom, so you're gonna do 1 Mutilate followed by Toxic Blade. If this puts you at 4+ points, most likely it will go straight for the envenom. If not, go for another Mutilate to reach it and then the envenom. Afterwards, you repeat this process pretty much. Just keep envenom up during the full duration of Toxic Blade. Once it goes down and your garrote is below 5 seconds, you're gonna pop your second cooldown-ish. Vanish and refresh Garrote. Remember that because of Subterfuge, it's gonna deal more damage. The idea with Vanish is exactly that, to get that more powerful Garrote to use it when on cooldown, preferably in combination with Vendetta. They actually share cooldowns, so it's pretty easy to combine. And since your next Garrote refresh is gonna tick for its normal damage, it's best to let that Subterfuge Garrote tick until its last second before refreshing. Now, if you with Master Assassin, Vanish uses change a bit because you no longer want to use Vanish with a Garrote, but with Envenom. So during that Toxic Blade window, making that Envenom crit and the subsequent Mutilate, meaning an almost sure chance of getting 4 points right off the bat for another Envenom back to back. For Night Stalker, this changes as well. You want to use it with Rupture, so it takes for more damage. Like that Subterfuge Garrote, let it tick for its entire duration before refreshing. Now, what about Extinguish? It's slightly more tricky as you want to maximize your dot durations when using it. To do that, you have to make use of that pandemic effect we talked about earlier, as that will make it so the dots have the highest timer, meaning more exsanguinate damage. So when starting up, you want to go for that Garrote. This is with Subterfuge, by the way. Then a single Mutilate followed by a Rupture. Then your Vendetta, but not exsanguinate, not yet. You want to build towards max combo points, so 5. Then another Rupture. This way you're gonna get a huge timer on it. And now you have to do the same but for Garrote. So you go Vanish, then Garrote for a more powerful version, and only then exsanguinate. And follow that up with Mutilate and Envenom with the same rules as before while those dots tick. Now, if you with Night Stalker, you would instead use Vanish for a Rupture, not a Garrote, like before. As for exsanguinate mid-fight, so without Vanish and Vendetta, just try to make it so that before you use it, you just refreshed Rupture and Garrote is at least half of its duration left, but when the CDs are ready, follow the same idea as your opener. Now, before we talk about that trait, Shrouded Suffocation, which grants 2 combo points to Garrote and makes it deal more damage because of those benefits, it also slightly alters your opener with Exsanguinate. You still want to start with Garrote since it generates 2 points. You can go straight for a Rupture. I know it's weird, but bear with me. The idea is to have that highest timer. Follow that up with another Garrote. This is only doable with Subterfuge, of course, then Vendetta and a single Mutilate, another Rupture, and then finally the Exsanguinate. This way you're getting the highest dot timer like before while getting benefit of that extra point of the set trait. After that Exsanguinate, go for 2 Envenoms, same rules as before, and refresh that Garrote with Vanish, Subterfuge. But yeah, that covers it all. As for cleave or multi-targeting, not much changes really. With Subterfuge, you would want to go into stealth or even use Vanish when possible to multi-dot Garrotes on as many targets as possible. Remember that with that trait, you're gonna get a lot of points. The other difference is with 3 targets or more, you can use your Fan of Knives, which only grants 1 combo point. However, because of Still Fate, each crit on any target will get you more points. So depending on that, you will get them quite fast, so you can spread your Ruptures. Like Garrote, you want to multi-dot them on up to 3 to 4 targets. Fan of Knives also spreads poisons nicely, so take that in mind. Bleeds and poisons means more energy for you to use, so you want to make that combination while AoEing, so you get a lot of energy so you can keep on spamming. Once that's all set up, dump points with Envenoms on your main target. As for the Toxic Blade Exsanguinate uses, do use on that same main target that you are damaging. But yeah, not a lot of changes, just how your points generate due to Fan of Knives and the multi-dotting. If with Crimson Tempest, do it after Ruptures, okay? So instead of the Envenom, just pop that up so you would spread the bleed. But yeah, that covers it all. As for stats, and then to wrap up, in terms of stats, agility tends to be the best, but in terms of secondaries, haste and crit, haste will provide a faster energy regeneration, a higher attack speed, and your poisons and bleeds will tick faster, which is great. As for crit, besides the obvious, is great because of the Still Fate passive. As for mastery, which increases poison damage and verse, is the least valuable, but as for everything stats-wise, they can change, so remember to them. In terms of traits, I did mention a couple. Another one that can change gameplay is Sharpened Blades that asks you to use Poison Knife, which is your ranged attack at high stacks for some pretty nice damage, so when there, use it. That's about it, really, in place of a Mutilate. As for how powerful they are, I placed a couple on the screen that you can check, but in the description you can check out the website to track all of that up, as they can change in power and new ones might come in the future, such as 8.1. But yeah, as always, thank you for watching, hope it helps. Remember to like and subscribe to get more videos like this, and check out my Patreon if you wish to support the channel. Have a fantastic day everyone, and I'll see you all next time. See ya!